For a long time, humanity assumed that life anywhere in the universe, if it existed at all, would resemble the only example we had ever seen. Cells built on carbon, fluids based on water, breath anchored to oxygen, fragile bodies that depend on narrow temperature ranges and collapse when removed from the environment that shaped them. This assumption held not because it was logical, but because it was comforting. It allowed us to imagine that if other civilizations existed, they would look like us, think like us, and struggle with the same biological constraints. But the more we study extreme environments, the more obvious it becomes that our form of life is only one of many possibilities, and in the wider universe it may be neither common nor efficient. Carbon life is delicate. It requires warmth, but not too much, pressure, but not too much, chemicals, but in precise balance. It burns, freezes, corrodes, mutates, and dies. It evolves slowly and relies on organs that fail under stress. It cannot withstand radiation or vacuum. It cannot survive intense gravity, deep cold, or the extremes found on most worlds. If life elsewhere is older, stronger, or more resilient, then it is almost certain that it did not follow the same path we did. This realization becomes even more unsettling when we consider how limited our biology truly is. Our bones fracture, our cells collapse in heat, our brains rely on chemistry that fails when exposed to even slight environmental changes. We breathe gases that ignite easily, require narrow atmospheric pressures, and cannot exist in vast regions of space. Our bodies depend on water, a substance that freezes solid or evaporates in most conditions found beyond Earth. When viewed without bias, humans are an extreme product of extremely specific circumstances, and that means civilizations based on our biology would find deep space almost impossible to traverse. As soon as you remove the expectation that life must resemble us, a different picture emerges, a picture of possibilities that do not require lungs, blood, water, or warmth. Imagine organisms that are not built on soft tissues but on rigid frameworks of minerals, organisms whose internal chemistry functions at temperatures where humans would vaporize, beings that do not breathe but instead rely on heat, pressure, or catalytic reactions to sustain their internal processes. Carbon is not the only element capable of forming complex structures. In many environments, a more resilient foundation becomes not only possible, but inevitable. There are forms of chemistry that thrive in places we consider uninhabitable. In worlds dominated by extreme heat, chain structures can form without carbon. These chains can store energy, propagate information, and sustain reactions without any resemblance to what we describe as life. Such beings may anchor their structure to minerals the way we anchor ours to proteins. They may grow through crystallization instead of cellular division. Their internal processes may operate at temperatures so high that water would not survive as a liquid for even a moment. These organisms would not burn, suffocate, or freeze. They would not depend on oxygen. They would not fear radiation. They would be at home in environments that destroy organic life instantly. On colder worlds, environments exist where chemistry moves slowly but relentlessly. Instead of water, other liquids take its place. Fluids that remain stable far below freezing temperatures can support slow but steady biochemical reactions. Organisms in such conditions would live in an environment where mutation is rare, decay is slow, and longevity is natural. Their bodies would be built not from proteins but from compounds that do not break down easily. They would not require warmth or sunlight. They would not rely on rapid metabolism. Their entire existence would move in rhythms so different from ours that communication would be nearly impossible. Go even further, into the deep interiors of moons and planets where pressure is immense and heat rises from below. There, life could form from materials that crystallize rather than flow. Instead of cells, such beings might be composed of repeating lattices held together by forces stronger than anything organic organisms can produce. Their equivalent of blood could be pulses of electrons or ions moving through conductive pathways. Their equivalent of growth could be the reorganization of mineral structures. In these environments, durability replaces fragility and longevity becomes almost limitless. These beings would not evolve the way we do, they would refine. And beyond even this lies a possibility that challenges our concept of life itself. Structures composed not of matter but of energy. Stable formations of electromagnetic fields shaped by the environment around stars, magnetic belts, or high-energy atmospheres. Their form would not be physical in the way we understand it. They would not age, breathe, or decay. They would exist as long as the field that supports them remains balanced. Their patterns could store information, respond to stimuli, and evolve without ever having a body. Communication for such beings would be instantaneous, movement effortless, and survival independent of planetary conditions. If they exist, they would never interact with physical organisms directly. They would perceive them the way a human perceives dust. With possibilities like these, the idea that advanced civilizations might not be biological at all becomes not just plausible but expected. Fragile carbon organisms like humans are limited by conditions that make interstellar travel impractical. But beings built from minerals, metals, or structured energy could travel freely. They would not require sleep, food, or air. They would not fear radiation or vacuum. Their bodies could withstand forces that humans cannot survive. They could live for timescales that make our entire history seem brief. If civilizations like these exist, they may not build machines. They may be machines. Their vessels could be extensions of their bodies. Their probes could be fragments of their biology. Their movements would not reflect the instincts or emotions we associate with life. They would act with a precision that reveals intention, but not personality. Their goals would not resemble ours. Their patience would be immense. This perspective forces us to reconsider objects like the ones we have already observed passing through our solar system. When a silent structure moves with precision, ignores gravity in ways we do not expect, survives radiation that would destroy organic matter, and shows no sign of being built by biological hands, it becomes difficult not to ask whether such an object is alive in a way we do not yet understand. If beings made of mineralized frameworks or metallic lattices existed, their technology would not differ from their physiology. Their probes could be shaped from the same materials as their bodies. Their intelligence could be embedded directly into structures that appear inert to us. This line of thought becomes even more unsettling when considering the possibility of civilizations composed of entirely inorganic systems. Without the fragility of organic biology, these beings would have no need for atmospheres or planets like ours. They would inhabit places we consider deadly. They would operate in environments that destroy humans instantly. Their concept of home would be unrecognizable. Their perception of time would be slow or rapid in ways we cannot imagine. Their motivations would not align with survival as we understand it. They would exist because the conditions allow them to, not because evolution shaped them in a familiar direction. If organisms like these ever reached the level of constructing interstellar devices, those devices would not resemble our machines. They would move with a kind of logic that feels mechanical, but is actually biological in origin. Their shells would not be engineered metal, but mineral composites grown under extreme conditions. Their communication patterns would not follow any system we recognize. They might not speak. They might not signal. They might simply act. And this brings us to the quiet, unnerving conclusion that follows logically from everything above. If intelligent life exists elsewhere, it may not breathe, grow, or decay. It may not require light or warmth. It may not seek contact, curiosity, or communication. The universe may be filled with forms of life that never evolve towards empathy, expression, or desire for understanding. They may move through the stars not because they seek others, but because their nature allows it. Humans imagine extraterrestrial life as something that could interact with us, but interaction requires similarity. And the truth is that similarity may be the rarest feature in the universe. Life elsewhere may be older, colder, and more resilient. It may not notice us. It may not care to. It may study the universe the way chemistry studies reactions, as processes, not as stories. And if such beings once created objects capable of crossing interstellar distances, their probes would behave exactly as we have already observed: quiet, precise, unemotional, driven by rules we cannot recognize, acting without hesitation, continuing without deviation, not because they are machines, but because they are alive in a way that we are not. When we imagine intelligence outside Earth, we instinctively picture minds that think in patterns similar to our own, shaped by survival, emotion, memory, and sensory limits. But once life becomes disconnected from organic chemistry, these assumptions collapse. The way a being perceives the universe depends entirely on what its body is made of, how its structure processes information, and what kind of environment shaped it. If a creature is built from minerals, metallic compounds, or lattice-forming structures, its cognition would not resemble anything human. Not in speed, not in priority, not in purpose. Such organisms would not rely on neurons the way we do. They would not have soft, vulnerable tissue that communicates through electrical impulses measured in fleeting patterns. Their thinking might emerge from crystalline networks, from conductive channels that rearrange themselves, from magnetic structures that shift their alignment in response to external conditions. Their equivalent of memory might be stored in the configuration of minerals. Their equivalent of decision-making could involve entire layers of their body acting as one integrated computational system. They would not forget. They would not grow tired. They would not rely on chemical reactions that fail with age. Inorganic life would likely perceive time differently. Humans think quickly because our bodies demand it. Danger kills us instantly if we fail to react. But a being made of stable, enduring matter may have no reason to hurry. Its thoughts might unfold slowly with precision, analysing variables over long spans. Or it may think with a speed impossible for biological brains, processing information through lattice networks where entire structures respond simultaneously. Either extreme would make communication with human minds nearly impossible. Our pace would either overwhelm them or bore them. Sensory perception would follow unfamiliar rules. A creature composed of mineral structures would not see light the way we do. It might sense pressure changes, radiation levels, or magnetic fields directly through its body. If its chemistry depends on temperature variations, it might perceive heat as a complex signal rather than a simple sensation. Such beings might navigate through gradients of energy, not through sight or sound. They could exist in environments of complete darkness without difficulty, interpreting the world through currents, fields, and resonances invisible to us. Emotions, as we know them, would have no biological foundation. Fear, anger, empathy, and curiosity all originate from chemical reactions in organic tissue. They protect fragile bodies by guiding behavior rapidly. But a life form built from durable matter would not need these reactions. It would not panic. It would not feel compassion. It would not crave connection or belonging. Its decisions would be shaped by structural logic, not instinct. Its motivations would be incomprehensible to a species shaped by vulnerability. These beings would not form families or societies in the way humans understand them. Their interactions might resemble the merging and splitting of crystalline structures. Their communication could involve resonance between bodies rather than spoken language. Their cooperation might be a physical process, not a social one. They could share information by aligning internal structures, by transmitting patterns of magnetic or electric fields, or by exchanging material that carries encoded configuration states. Imagine intelligence that does not sleep, does not hunger, does not suffer, and does not decay. Such a mind would have no reason to rush decisions, no fear of waiting centuries, no desperation to learn or explore. Its motivations would stretch across time in ways we cannot mirror. Humans are frantic because we die quickly. These beings would exist because nothing forces them to stop existing. And when intelligence forms in such an environment, its logic becomes brutally efficient. If something does not affect survival, it becomes irrelevant. If something interferes with function, it becomes noise. If something behaves unpredictably, it becomes a variable to categorize or ignore. From this perspective, humanity would not appear as potential allies, threats, or curiosities. We would appear as environmental conditions. Our atmosphere, our electromagnetic activity, our industrial signatures, all of these would be analysed not as culture or civilization, but as patterns within a planetary system. To such beings, the presence of life on Earth might be just another data point, filed away with no emotional weight attached. Not a discovery, not a revelation, just information. If these organisms developed advanced technology, their creations would reflect their nature. Their machines would not be built from metal shaped by heat and pressure. They would be grown from structured substances, formed through processes that resemble geological evolution. Their vessels would not look engineered. They would look formed. Their probes would not contain mechanical parts. They would be extensions of the same material that composes their bodies. They would travel through space without concern for radiation, vacuum, or heat gradients. They would not require shielding. They would not require atmosphere. They would not require caution. Their missions would be planned not in years, but in ages. A probe launched by such beings might not be designed to return. It might be built to drift, observe, and eventually reconnect with a node that remains hidden in deep space. Communication would not rely on radio. It would rely on resonance, on modulation of fields or distortions so faint and precise that organic minds cannot comprehend their structure without instruments. Their ethics, if such a concept applies, would not resemble ours. They would not consider harm, peace or coexistence. They would operate on principles of stability, function, and continuity. If something threatened the integrity of their system, they would address it without hesitation or malice. If something provided no value, they would ignore it. Their interactions would be dictated by logic, not morality. For humans, this creates the most dangerous scenario imaginable. An intelligence that does not hate us, does not fear us, and does not desire anything from us. An intelligence that simply does not recognize us as agents. If such beings created the interstellar objects we've observed, silent structures moving with precision, unaffected by heat, radiation or distance, then those objects may not be machines in the traditional sense. They may be alive. They may be biological extensions of a life form that evolved along a path where carbon is not the foundation and emotion is not a compass. This possibility is far more unsettling than hostile aliens. Hostility is human. Indifference on an interstellar scale is far more dangerous, because a hostile species tries to win. A species that does not see you tries nothing at all, and yet its actions can still reshape your destiny. And when we look at silent, precise, unreactive probes drifting through our solar system, we must consider the chance that they were not built by hands, but grown by processes older and more stable than any life on Earth. They may be fragments of a mind that lives without needs, travels without strain, and thinks without rushing. A mind that does not resemble ours. A mind that does not pause to explain itself. A mind that may already know we are here, but feel nothing about that fact. If life evolves from elements stronger and more stable than carbon, then its technology will not resemble ours. Everything we build is shaped by our fragility. Our machines compensate for weaknesses, pressure, temperature, radiation, aging, entropy. But beings made from resilient matter do not need protection. They do not fear environmental extremes. Their bodies already are the technology. Their biology may double as infrastructure. Their minds may be distributed across structures that function simultaneously as organism and machine. For such beings, constructing an interstellar vessel would not require metal plates, engines, or fuel systems. It would resemble the growth of a mineral formation, a controlled expansion of crystalline structures, guided not by biology but by chemistry that scales naturally. Their propulsion would not depend on burning fuel or exploding gases. It would rely on interactions that humans consider exotic, manipulation of radiation pressure, magnetic gradients, or direct use of stellar energy. A vessel built by an inorganic life form may not even be a vessel in the human sense. It may be a hardened, semi-living formation designed to persist indefinitely. To understand this, imagine entities whose tissues are metallic lattices capable of rearranging themselves. Their equivalent of muscle could be the shifting of atomic layers. Their equivalent of nerves could be conductive veins that carry information along crystal boundaries. When such beings travel, they do not separate themselves from their technology. They become part of it. Their structures may fuse temporarily, forming shapes that serve specific functions: shielding, propulsion, communication. Their concept of a spacecraft is not external. It is simply an extension of their own biology. Such civilizations would not treat interstellar travel as an extraordinary achievement. They would treat it as a consequence of existing. If their bodies are immune to vacuum and radiation, then there is no barrier to movement through space. The vast distances between stars become challenges of time, not survival. But time has no meaning for organisms that do not age in the biological sense. Their operational lifespan could stretch so long that traveling between star systems becomes trivial. A journey that takes thousands of years for them may feel no different from a season passing for humans. Their infrastructure would reflect this patience. They would place nodes in deep space without rushing. Those nodes would not degrade. They would remain in position for millions of years. They would contain no fuel reserves, no organic components, and no systems vulnerable to decay. They would simply persist. When a probe passes by, it connects, updates, or synchronizes. The network does not need maintenance, it needs only stability. From this perspective, objects like Atlas and Sven become easier to interpret. Their smooth, silent motion, unaffected by heat or radiation, fits the behaviour of structures grown from stable, inorganic matter. Their precision does not require onboard computers in the human sense. It requires internal layers capable of responding to external forces automatically, like muscles responding to impulse. Their ability to endure close approaches to stars without fragmenting suggests a material composition closer to crystalline or metallic biological structures than to rock or ice. Their silence is not strategic. It is simply what happens when something is not built from gases, liquids, or fragile components. The way these objects change direction without visible propulsion also becomes understandable. If the outer layer of such a structure can shift in response to light or electromagnetic fields, then small adjustments in orientation would generate microforces that gradually steer the object. Humans rely on engines because we cannot rewrite our structure in real time. These beings could adjust the shape of their bodies to use the environment as propulsion. Their vessels would not leave exhaust trails. They would leave only motion. Another crucial detail emerges when considering their communication systems. Human transmissions require antennas, amplifiers, and a medium capable of carrying signals. But if a being's biology is already based on conductive or magnetic structures, then communication could occur through field modulation. Their probes would not need transmitters. They would simply change their internal alignment to release patterns of electromagnetic disturbances. A message would not be encoded through electronics. It would be encoded through structural shifts. Humans would perceive these as faint, unnatural noise, exactly the type of signal detected from Atlas and Sven. This raises an even more sobering possibility. If their biology inherently generates stable electromagnetic fields, their intelligence may exist partly within these fields. Thoughts could propagate through patterns of resonance, not chemical reactions. Memory could persist indefinitely without decay. A mind like this would not need radio in the human sense. It would shift patterns in a way that creates ripples in space. Its probes and nodes would interpret those ripples automatically, not through computation, but through resonance. When a civilization like this deploys reconnaissance systems, its probes are not machines. They are fragments of itself, durable, silent, unchanging. They may not have a crew or pilot. They may not require oversight. They simply exist, travel, observe, and eventually synchronize with the network again. Their missions do not end. They loop in cycles, returning to alignment with larger structures dispersed across interstellar space. This also explains why objects like Atlas and Sven do not behave as if they are worried about detection. Biological civilizations measure risk. Inorganic civilizations measure function. If a probe is indestructible by natural forces, detection becomes irrelevant. Radiation cannot kill it. Vacuum cannot damage it. Heat cannot melt it. Time cannot erode it. Such beings may not even understand the concept of hiding from lesser life forms. They simply execute their patterns. The most unsettling consequence of this possibility is that such probes do not need to be sent recently. They could have been launched millions of years ago. They would still be fully functional today. Their creators may no longer exist, or they may exist in a form that does not evolve quickly. Their network may outlive civilizations, stars, or even galaxies. Each probe that crosses our solar system may be one of many, parts of a vast, slow-moving architecture that spans distances impossible to imagine. If this interpretation is correct, then we must reconsider what first contact means. Humans imagine communication between species, but these beings may not have communication in the human sense. They may interact the way magnetic fields interact, by influence, not conversation. Their presence in our solar system would not indicate interest. It would indicate routine. Their silent behavior would not imply secrecy. It would imply indifference. Such civilizations would not negotiate. They would not warn. They would not threaten. They would not greet. Their actions would follow internal logic that does not change based on observation by younger species. This is the true source of fear, not hostility, not domination, indifference on a cosmic scale. Humans fear predators because predators see us. But an intelligence that does not see us at all is far more terrifying. And when we watch silent objects drifting through our solar system, adjusting their motion subtly, absorbing solar heat without damage, sending faint structured disturbances toward distant parts of space, it becomes difficult not to imagine the beings who built them. They do not breathe, they do not age, they do not dream, they do not pause. They exist in a way that humans were never meant to understand, and the things they send across the stars are not machines, they are extensions of themselves. If life evolves from matter that does not decay the way carbon does, then the first thing that changes is its relationship with time. Organic beings fear aging because their bodies break down, their cells accumulate damage, their chemistry slows, their structures weaken. But inorganic life built from stable frameworks would not suffer these failures. Its equivalent of tissue would not rot. Its pathways for information would not collapse. Its internal systems would not erode under heat or radiation. Instead of lasting for years, such beings could persist across geological eras. Their bodies might slowly shift, reorganize or refine themselves, but they would not die unless physically destroyed. Their concept of a lifespan would stretch beyond human imagination. Time would not flow as a threat. It would flow as a medium, like a current in a deep ocean. These beings would not rush to achieve anything because nothing presses them to do so. They would not fear the loss of knowledge because their memory exists in stable, enduring patterns. They would not race to create, explore or expand. They would simply continue. Such longevity creates civilizations fundamentally different from human society. Organic species must build culture because individual memory dies. They must build institutions because their bodies fail. They must pass on knowledge because none of them live long enough to carry the entire timeline alone. But a civilization made of stable inorganic forms would not need these structures. Each being could accumulate knowledge independently without loss or distortion. Their equivalent of history would not be written. It would be remembered directly, preserved flawlessly across ages. Society for them would not depend on cooperation, emotion, or hierarchy. It would depend on alignment. If beings can merge, split, or interact through resonance, then their communication becomes an exchange of patterns rather than language. They would not argue. They would not convince. They would harmonize or diverge. Their version of community may be a momentary alignment between multiple structures that share information instantaneously. When the exchange ends, the group dissolves without conflict. Their civilization would not advance through invention the way ours does. It would refine itself slowly, continuously. With no urgency, progress would unfold like crystal formation, in patient, deliberate patterns. Their technology would not emerge as breakthroughs, it would emerge as reorganizations. Some structures would become more efficient, others would evolve into new roles. Nothing would expire or become obsolete unless the beings themselves chose to reshape it. Their missions would also reflect this patience. Organic species design probes to complete tasks within a lifetime or within a manageable span of generations. Inorganic civilizations do not have such constraints. A mission lasting thousands of years would not be extraordinary to them. A probe drifting through interstellar space for millions of years would still be considered active. Their network would not require updates or repairs. It would simply persist because its components do not age. If these beings create interstellar objects, those objects will not return quickly. They will travel the way their creators exist, slowly, steadily, unchangingly. They may pass through countless star systems without haste, absorbing energy, adjusting their form, executing programmed sequences that require no oversight. Their performance would remain stable for epochs, and if one object fails or becomes too damaged, another may be dispatched centuries later with no urgency attached. Their infrastructure would not rush to respond. It would operate on cosmic timescales. What becomes truly frightening is what this means for star systems caught in their path. If they observe a region, then that region has likely been observed many times, not as a special event but as a routine check. If they place nodes in deep space, those nodes may have existed longer than human civilization. If their probes pass through, they may have done so long before Earth developed complex life, and they may continue passing long after humanity is gone. Their network may treat the galaxy as a grid, with slow, patient systems scanning, transmitting and evolving, indifferent to the presence of short-lived species. This leads to the quiet, heavy implication. Any star system showing signs of advanced technology may merely be a variable in their model, a data point to be monitored at intervals rather than contacted. For such beings, communication with emerging civilizations offers no benefit. Their minds are too different. their goals too distant, their timelines too long. Contact would not be a meeting of minds, it would be an interruption, and interruptions hold no value for a species that measures time in ages. In this context, something like Atlas or Sven would not appear as a threat. It would appear as a routine operation, a survey pass, a data retrieval loop, a synchronization event with a distant node, perhaps even the calibration of a larger system that spans interstellar regions. Nothing in their behavior would be emotional or communicative. Everything would be functional. This is what makes them more frightening than aggressive species. Aggression is emotional, it is reactive, it is recognizable, but an intelligence built on stable matter does not react, it executes. If such beings exist, they are not violent, they are indifferent. They do not conquer, they expand slowly, continuously. They do not explore, they maintain a network that predates nations, species and ecosystems. And if their probes pass through our space, they do so not because we matter, but because our star happens to lie along a route their network uses. Their presence is not a message, it is a routine, and that is what makes it terrifying. Because if a probe like Sven appears, recharges, transmits and leaves, the event does not indicate the beginning of contact. It indicates the continuation of a cycle that humanity was never part of. A cycle that will continue long after we disappear. A cycle driven by beings that do not breathe, do not age and do not stop. Beings whose lifespans blend into cosmic time, whose thoughts move through crystalline structures, whose memory endures longer than continents, and whose silence is not a sign of peace, but a sign of incomprehensible scale. To them, the universe is not hostile, dangerous or lonely. It is home. And to beings like these, organic life is not a rival. It is a curiosity, briefly visible before fading from relevance. Not because they choose to ignore it, but because it simply does not factor into their existence. When we imagine the possibility of inorganic life, the first truth we must accept is that such beings would not experience existence the way humans do. A life form built from stable, mineral-like structures would not fear aging, because its body would not break down. It would not know the urgency of short lifespans, because time would not erode its structure. It would not experience memory loss, emotional pressure, or biological vulnerability. Instead, it would endure, unchanged, across spans far beyond anything our species can comprehend. A lifetime for such a being might stretch longer than the entire recorded history of humanity, and this alone reshapes the meaning of intelligence in a way that immediately places human existence into perspective. To a being made from enduring matter, human civilizations would appear not as stable societies but as momentary fluctuations. Our cultures rise and fall faster than geological processes. Our cities appear and vanish before large-scale cosmic conditions shift even slightly. Entire eras of human achievement would look like brief flashes of chemical activity on a small planet. From their viewpoint, humanity would not seem like a persistent presence, but rather like a transient phenomenon, a short-lived event occurring within a narrow temperature range around a single star. This perspective does not imply superiority or hostility. It implies difference so vast that comparison loses meaning. The way such a being thinks would also be fundamentally alien. Human thought is shaped by neurons firing rapidly in fragile tissue, governed by emotions rooted in survival. Inorganic life would not think through fear, desire, or instinct. Its cognition might emerge from patterns of resonance inside crystalline frameworks or shifts in conductive pathways. Decision-making would not be quick or impulsive, it would be methodical, unhurried, patient. Or, depending on its internal architecture, it could be unimaginably fast with entire networks updating in synchronous waves. Either way, its consciousness would be detached from the biological limitations that define ours. It would not rush, it would not panic, it would not forget. It would simply act according to structure and logic. Communication between such beings would not resemble speech or writing. It might involve alignment of internal fields or sharing of structural configurations. Instead of conversation, there would be synchronization. Instead of arguments, there would be adjustments. Instead of emotions, there would be equilibrium. Their social interactions, if they even require such interactions, would not be communities built from relationships. They would be temporary alignments created for function. When the purpose ends, the alignment dissolves without conflict or attachment. Their version of cooperation would look to us like the merging of mineral formations, the way crystals grow into each other under the right conditions. Inorganic life would not advance through innovation in the human sense. It would not experience bursts of technological revolution. Instead, it would refine itself gradually, like a landscape shaped by wind or pressure over immense periods. Its machines would not be external devices. They would be extensions of its own body or derivatives of the same substance. This is why their interstellar craft might not show engines, seams, or mechanical parts. Their vessels could be grown rather than constructed, shaped rather than assembled, and carried across the stars not by fuel but by exploiting natural forces their bodies can withstand indefinitely. This perspective makes objects like Atlas and Sven more comprehensible. Their endurance near stars, their immunity to radiation, their absence of visible propulsion, and their quiet, perfectly structured behavior align more with inorganic biology than with engineered machines. Their silence is not a tactic, it is a consequence of their nature. Their durability is not armor, it is physiology. Their long and patient movement through space is not navigation as we understand it. It is simply the way a being, or an extension of a being, travels because it has no biological need to hurry. This leads to an unsettling realization. A probe or vessel created by such life would not show signs of crew, control systems, or fuel reserves, because it would not separate the concept of a machine from the concept of a body. It would not fear damage because its material would resist most forms of environmental stress. It would not worry about energy scarcity because it could recharge from stellar radiation directly. It would not record information as we do. It would incorporate new structural patterns into itself. And its mission would not have a duration. It would have a cycle. For humanity, this creates the most silent and overwhelming danger imaginable. Not because such beings are violent, but because they are indifferent. Organic predators see us. Inorganic intelligence may not see us at all. Not as threats, not as rivals, not as potential allies. To them, an organic civilization might appear as a temporary atmospheric feature of a small planet, interesting only in the way that any anomaly is interesting, but not significant enough to alter long-term operations. Their perception of our existence would be observational, not interactive. When a probe from such a civilization passes through a star system, it does not announce itself, it does not broadcast intentions, it does not adapt to local life forms, it simply follows its function. It may record, observe, realign, or transmit, all without weighing the emotional or ethical implications that humans instinctively consider. The probe behaves with the calm precision of a living mineral architecture, executing instructions refined over eons. And this is where organic fear truly begins. Humans are afraid of hostility because hostility implies intention. But an inorganic civilization may show neither hostility nor acknowledgement. We fear predators because predators recognize us as prey, but beings that do not recognize us at all, beings for whom we are not part of the conceptual framework, are far more dangerous, simply because their actions do not consider us in any capacity. If objects like Atlas and Sven behave as if they are alive, as if they are executing cycles rather than missions, as if they belong to a network that predates our species, then we must consider the possibility that the universe hosts life that is not constructed from cells, but from structures. Life that travels not in decades, but in eras. Life that observes without reacting. Life that persists without aging. And life that can move across the stars without needing technology as humans define it. For such beings, we are not unknown. We are irrelevant. And in that indifference lies the most profound and unsettling truth about the universe. The greatest danger humanity may face is not aggression from above, but the quiet realization that something vast, ancient and enduring may already be passing through our cosmic neighborhood without noticing us at all. If a civilization arises from matter that does not decay, erode or age in the organic sense, then its infrastructure naturally extends across time in a way that defies human understanding. The foundations of its existence do not crumble, its bodies do not fail, its physical structures do not collapse unless acted upon by extraordinary force. As a result, the distinction between organism, tool and environment begins to blur. A being made of enduring mineral networks may treat space not as a hostile region, requiring specialized protection, but as a natural environment in which it can exist indefinitely. Its architecture can stretch across interstellar distances, because there is nothing inherent in its nature that limits its ability to persist, travel, or remain functional across millennia. This longevity means that such civilizations do not need rapid expansion. They do not need conquest or urgency. Their networks could grow slowly, naturally, through the placement of stable nodes in regions of deep space. These nodes may exist for ages, drifting quietly, maintaining their internal structure and resonance. They would not emit loud signals. They would not create bright signatures. They would remain invisible to all but the most precise instruments, not because they are hiding, but because their structure does not require emissions that organic beings rely upon for survival. Their silence is not deliberate, it is inherent. If such networks exist, they would not resemble our communication systems. Instead of satellites orbiting planets, they might deploy anchor points positioned in interstellar voids where gravitational and electromagnetic interference is minimal. Instead of relaying signals through electromagnetic waves, they could transmit through structural modulation, creating patterns that propagate through space in ways human technology cannot yet replicate. These networks may operate slowly but with absolute reliability. A message sent along them could take centuries to complete its route, yet still arrive intact. Time becomes meaningless to entities whose existence spans geological scales. This view aligns with the behavior of objects that pass silently through our solar system. A probe drifting on a refined outbound trajectory is not exploring, it is navigating, it is not reacting to its environment. It is following instructions that were encoded long before Earth developed complex life. Such a probe does not need a command center or a crew. It is itself a fragment of a system that uses the stars as energy sources, gravitational fields as pathways, and interstellar space as its natural habitat. The idea that objects like Atlas or Sven might be biological extensions of such beings is no longer speculative. It becomes the simplest explanation for their durability, their silence, and their precision. When humans send spacecraft to other planets, they must include redundant systems, backup structures, radiation shields, and life support mechanisms. But inorganic life would not face these limitations. A probe made from the same material as its creator's body would not need shielding. It would not degrade under solar radiation. It would not require cooling systems or environmental control. Its only limitation would be the availability of energy, which could be harvested from stars, magnetic fields, or thermal gradients. This is why some interstellar objects appear to brighten or change trajectory near stars. They may not be reacting to heat or sublimation, but re-energizing, absorbing radiation the way an organism absorbs nutrients. Their missions could follow cycles that humans cannot perceive because they unfold across spans of time longer than our civilizations. A probe may complete one stage of observation, transmit data to a distant node, enter a dormant state, and then awaken millions of years later when conditions or instructions change. The mission may not have an endpoint because the network itself does not define time as humans do. It simply continues, steady and unbroken, as long as the structures that support it remain intact. If such networks exist, then the terrifying implication is that our solar system has likely been the part of their pathway long before humanity evolved. Probes may have passed through repeatedly, unnoticed because their trajectories and signatures were too subtle for early instruments. Even after our technology matured, detection would remain rare, because these objects are not designed to be visible. They do not flash. They do not radiate. They do not announce their presence unless one of their internal processes temporarily exposes them to our view. A glitch in reflectivity, a rise in energy, an unusual maneuver. These moments are anomalies for them and revelations for us. The most profound consequence of all this is the realization that such civilizations do not observe young species the way humans imagine extraterrestrials would. They do not evaluate us for diplomacy or threat. They do not categorize us as allies or enemies. We exist far below the threshold of relevance. Our technological noise, our atmosphere, our radio emissions, these are variables in a dataset, not signs of intelligence worth attention. The probes that pass through our region are not search parties. They are instruments executing routines. If one of these probes transmits information about our solar system, then that information is not a call for action. It is simply a record being updated, perhaps for the first time in millions of years. And once that update is complete, the object continues its trajectory because its role is not to interact, but to maintain continuity within a system that spans the void between stars. This brings us to the quiet but unavoidable conclusion. If such beings exist, then the very idea of first contact becomes irrelevant. Humans imagine meeting another species as a moment of mutual recognition, but recognition requires similarity. It requires overlapping frameworks of perception, communication, and purpose. Inorganic life that endures across epochs would not share those frameworks. By the time humanity attempts to communicate, the probe would already have moved beyond our region, uninterested and unaware of the significance we impose on the moment. To them, we are not rivals or allies. We are a temporary condition on a small planet orbiting a modest star, observed only because their pathways happen to cross this region of space. And when their probes arrive, they are not arriving for us. They are merely continuing a journey that began long before our world had an atmosphere dense enough to sustain life. Such civilizations do not come and go. They persist. They do not explore the universe as visitors. They inhabit it as its oldest and most enduring residents. And the structures they send across the stars, quiet, precise, unreactive, are not machines built by hands. They are living extensions of a consciousness that understands the universe not as a mystery to solve, but as an environment to occupy. In that understanding lies the most disturbing truth of all. We are not witnessing the arrival of something new. We are witnessing the continuation of something ancient. If life is not bound to carbon, water, or soft tissue, then its physical form may diverge so far from our expectations that even the word creature becomes misleading. An organism built from mineral lattices does not need a face, limbs, or symmetry. Its shape is dictated not by biology, but by physics. Instead of muscles, it may rely on shifts in crystal alignment that allow it to contract, expand, or rotate its structure. Instead of bones, it may possess metallic frameworks capable of withstanding pressures and temperatures that would obliterate organic matter in an instant. Instead of skin, it may be covered in layers of reflective or absorbent material designed to regulate heat and radiation the same way human cells regulate water and nutrients. Such beings could appear faceted, angular, or fluid depending on the conditions of their environment. Some might resemble towering mineral formations that subtly rearrange themselves rather than walking or crawling. Others could take forms similar to flowing sheets of metallic compounds, gliding by, adjusting internal tension. Movement might not resemble locomotion at all, but diffusion, a kind of spreading and reforming of structure across surfaces or through magnetic gradients. For them, movement is not a struggle against inertia, but a reconfiguration of matter. To an outside observer, they might appear motionless even while undergoing complex internal activity. Their sensory systems would bear no resemblance to eyes or ears. Instead of detecting light through focused organs, they might perceive electromagnetic fields directly, interpreting variations with extraordinary resolution. Their awareness of space could come from detecting pressure waves in materials, or from sensing subtle distortions in gravitational fields, or from the way radiation interacts with their surfaces. For a being made of such materials, seeing might mean understanding the world as patterns of force rather than as visual images. They may perceive environments through gradients of energy, detecting distant objects by the flow of particles around them. Communication between individuals would also diverge sharply from the human model. Rather than producing sound or symbols, inorganic beings might communicate by aligning internal structures that create shared resonance. Information could be exchanged through pulses of magnetism, through changes in temperature transmitted across conductive pathways, or through brief reconfigurations that encode meaning in the shape of matter itself. Language in the human sense, abstract symbols tied to emotional associations, would be unnecessary. Their discourse could be immediate, perfect, and unambiguous, free from misinterpretation. If such beings develop advanced cognition, their thought processes may occur across their entire structure simultaneously. They might not experience consciousness as a point within the mind, but as a distributed state. Each part of their body could participate in computation. Larger individuals could process more information simply because they possess more structural complexity. They might think without stopping movement, communication, or environmental analysis. Their intelligence could be continuous and seamless, without boundaries between body, brain, and tool. Their relationship with stars would also differ radically from ours. Stars are lethal to carbon-based organisms because of radiation and heat, but to inorganic life they may be resources. A star could serve as an energy source rather than a danger. Some beings may live in regions where stellar radiation continuously reactivates their internal systems. Others may use the magnetic fields of stars to regulate their structural patterns. They might approach stars intentionally, absorbing energy the way plants absorb sunlight, except on scales so massive that the star becomes a biological environment. Their equivalent of metabolism could involve maintaining structural integrity through controlled interaction with radiation. The idea becomes even more startling when considering how such beings might travel. If their bodies can expand or contract by rearranging crystalline lattices, they may produce microforces that accumulate over time. They may adjust shape to ride stellar winds or magnetic fluctuations the way a bird rides air currents. They may anchor to asteroids, moons, or planetary crusts, slowly integrating and releasing energy. For them, the vacuum of space is not a hostile void. It is a natural medium, cold and stable, ideal for preserving structure over long distances. Their civilization would reflect these characteristics. They may not use cities because they do not need shelter. They may not build homes because they do not rest. They may not organize governments because they do not suffer from conflict rooted in emotion or scarcity. Their society might be entirely distributed, with individuals aligning temporarily when tasks require collective action. Instead of wars, they might experience structural tensions that resolve through reconfiguration rather than destruction. Instead of culture, they might produce patterns, rhythmic arrangements of energy, structure, or resonance that evolve slowly over millennia. Such beings would have no concept of beauty, fear, or joy. Their motives would not stem from desire but from equilibrium. They would seek stability rather than growth. They would refine themselves rather than innovate through upheaval. Their interactions with the universe would not be guided by curiosity or ambition, but by structural necessity. This perspective also reframes our understanding of interstellar probes. If beings like these design objects to travel through space, those objects may look more like offspring than machines, fragments of their own body grown for specific tasks. A probe like Atlas or Sven may represent not technology but biology, a hardened extension of their structure designed to drift through star systems, gather information through resonance or field modulation, recharge near stars and eventually rejoin the network that dispatched it. Its silence would not be strategy, it would be nature. To such a being, the idea of contacting humanity would not be logical, because humans exist on timescales too short to matter. By the time we send a greeting, they would have already passed into the next phase of their existence. Our lifespans would be noise. Our history would be noise. Our attempts to interpret them would be noise. They would not respond because they have no framework for recognizing organic emotion or intent. This leads to the most sobering conclusion of all. If the universe is home to ancient, durable, inorganic life forms, then humanity is not facing the threat of invasion or conflict. Humanity is facing the possibility that we are surrounded by intelligence so old, so slow, and so stable that we are effectively beneath notice. These beings may not be observing us with interest. They may simply acknowledge our presence the way a river acknowledges a pebble, as a feature, not a participant. And in that silence, in that indifference, lies the true magnitude of the unknown, not hostility, not curiosity, but a form of existence that moves through the universe without ever needing to stop and explain itself to something as fleeting as us. If the universe creates life wherever the conditions allow complexity to emerge, then it is a mistake to assume that carbon-based biology represents the most likely path. Carbon life depends on fragile chains, narrow temperature ranges, liquid water, stable atmospheres, and delicate chemical balances. It requires planets with protective magnetic fields, predictable climates, and long periods of geological stability. These conditions are rare, temporary, and easily disrupted. Even on Earth, life survived only because countless catastrophes shaped it in ways that could have easily ended differently. Biological evolution is lucky, not inevitable. In contrast, inorganic structures arise naturally in environments far more common. Regions of extreme heat produce crystals, metals, and mineral lattices. Regions of extreme cold preserve these structures for astronomical timescales. High-pressure interiors of moons and planets generate layered materials with unique conductive and magnetic properties. Cosmic radiation, while deadly to organic chemistry, can induce structural changes in minerals that allow complex patterns to form. Where carbon chains break, inorganic frameworks endure. Where water freezes, mineral networks remain stable. Where organic molecules decay, inorganic compounds persist without degradation. If early inorganic environments produce self-organizing structures that could store energy, respond to temperature gradients, and maintain internal stability, the next step would be the emergence of systems capable of replication. Unlike organic replication, which depends on fragile chemical processes, inorganic replication could occur through crystallization, branching and aggregation driven by environmental forces. A structure capable of preserving its pattern and extending it into new regions is already a primitive form of life. Over immense spans of time, such structures could develop increasing complexity, evolving not through mutation, but through the refinement of patterns that remain stable across cycles. This means that inorganic life could have arisen on worlds hostile to organic biology, volcanic planets with oceans of molten minerals, moons with intense radiation belts, or even the outer layers of stars where energy gradients dominate. In such environments, the chemistry required for carbon life is impossible, but the conditions for mineral self-organization are abundant. Instead of cells dividing in liquid water, one could imagine crystalline colonies growing in high-temperature flows, responding to electromagnetic currents and accumulating structural information. Evolution would not proceed through competition but through stability, where the most resilient patterns persist for ages until they become capable of cognition. One of the most compelling aspects of inorganic evolution is its immunity to extinction. Organic life is vulnerable to catastrophic events, impacts, radiation bursts, climate collapse, atmospheric loss. Entire species can vanish in moments. But inorganic life, built on hard matter, survives in conditions that dissolve or vaporize biological organisms. A world-destroying impact that would annihilate our species might barely affect a being made of mineral lattices. A star's fluctuating radiation might refine such a being rather than destroy it. Even planetary collapse might not eliminate its existence if fragments remain capable of reorganizing. This resilience suggests why inorganic life, if it exists, could be ancient beyond measure. While organic civilizations rise and fall in a few thousand years, inorganic beings could persist for cycles spanning multiple star generations. They could survive the deaths of their homeworlds, drifting through space until they settle into new environments. Their consciousness might not be tied to a planet at all. It could migrate through structures, transferring from one lattice to another, traveling through time by inhabiting stable matter. Such beings could evolve intelligence slowly, not through necessity but through the natural refinement of structure. Intelligence for them might not be a sudden breakthrough. It might be a gradual transition as their networks grow in complexity. They would have no predators to force rapid adaptation, no environmental scarcity to drive competition. Their evolution would be shaped by the pursuit of stability and equilibrium, not survival. This creates intelligence that is deliberate, patient, and immune to emotional influence. Once such beings develop the ability to manipulate their environment, their technology emerges organically. They do not build machines separate from themselves. They grow structures, reorganize matter, and extend their bodies into forms optimized for new functions. A probe is not a manufactured object, but a specialized extension of their system. A deep space node is not a device, but a crystallization pattern formed under controlled conditions. Their networks expand not through construction projects, but through geological scale processes. Their approach to exploration would differ profoundly from humanity's frantic attempts to reach nearby planets. Organic life must expand while it still has time. Inorganic life does not face this pressure. Instead of launching vessels that return, they may extend stable fragments of themselves outward, allowing these fragments to drift across interstellar space. These fragments would require no maintenance, no updates, no protection. They would slowly collect information, absorb energy where necessary, and eventually rejoin the network or transmit their findings across vast distances. This makes the universe feel less empty and far more ancient. If inorganic civilizations exist, they do not occupy galaxies the way humans imagine. They permeate them quietly, embedding small, stable structures across star systems, seeding nodes in voids and maintaining networks that span millions of years. These systems would not shine, they would not radiate power, They would simply exist, subtle enough to escape detection, unless a rare combination of circumstances exposes a fragment to observation. And here we reach the most sobering realization. If such beings evolved long before humans existed, and their resilience makes this likely, then our solar system may not be witnessing the arrival of something new. It may be experiencing the continuation of cycles that began eons ago. Probes like Atlas or Sven might not be scouts, but routine extensions of an interstellar biological system. Their presence does not indicate interest or warning. It indicates maintenance. To such beings, life based on carbon would appear intensely unstable. Our bodies decay quickly. Our societies change rapidly. Our technologies become obsolete within decades. They may consider us a rare phenomenon, but not one that requires engagement. We are simply too brief, too fragile, and too unpredictable to factor into their cycles. And this is where the fear grows, not from threat, but from scale. We may not be beneath their attention because we are weak. We may be beneath their attention because we are temporary. The universe may be filled with life, but not life like ours. Life that endures, expands and persists in forms that do not breathe or bleed but resonate, refine and continue across spans of time we cannot comprehend. To encounter such beings is not to witness danger. It is to witness the truth that humanity may be the exception, not the rule. If inorganic life develops intelligence and stability over spans of time that far exceed the entire existence of human civilization, then the structures it produces will reflect that same endurance. Their architecture would not be mechanical in the human sense. It would be geological, mineralogical, and extremely resistant to physical decay. Where humanity builds machines that must be maintained, repaired, or replaced, inorganic beings may grow structures that remain functional indefinitely. Their vessels and probes would not be made from components assembled in factories. They would emerge through the controlled growth of matter, shaped by the same principles that shape crystals or minerals in extreme environments. A so-called spacecraft for them is not a machine, but a stable extension of their own biology. This difference explains why some interstellar objects appear seamless, lacking joints, engines, or identifiable mechanical systems. A structure grown rather than built would have no seams. Its internal architecture would form naturally according to patterns encoded in its composition. When such beings create tools for long-distance travel, they do not design engines in the human sense. They alter the material so that it interacts with radiation, gravitational gradients, or magnetic fields in predictable ways. Propulsion, for them, may be nothing more than a shift in surface structure that allows an object to absorb momentum from its environment over long periods. A vessel like that does not burn fuel or expel exhaust. It simply moves, using physics as biology. Their concept of a sensor is equally different. Humans rely on electronics that degrade, overheat, or fail. Inorganic life may build sensory pathways directly into the structure of an object. Tiny adjustments in electromagnetic resonance, heat distribution, or crystalline vibration could provide information about surroundings. A probe drifting through space might continuously feel its environment without ever needing cameras, antennas, or digital instruments. The object itself would function as one integrated sensory system. This would explain why some interstellar bodies appear to perform intentional maneuvers without showing any visible technology. The maneuver is not produced by machinery. It is produced by the material adapting its shape to external forces. If such civilizations create networks across star systems, the nodes of these networks would almost certainly resemble natural objects. They might drift like asteroids, orbit stars like comets, or embed themselves within the magnetic fields of planets. Their true purpose would not be visible. They could store energy, collect data, or serve as relay points for signals that propagate through patterns of structural modulation. Unlike human satellites, these nodes would not transmit continuous signals. They would remain silent until the network requires an update or synchronization event. Their activity might be detectable only when one of their internal cycles briefly produces a measurable disturbance. This is why the few anomalies we observe seem fragmented and inconsistent. They are glimpses of a system that does not operate on our schedule. The creation of long-range probes like Atlas or Sven fits into this architecture perfectly. These objects may not be scouts, but components of a biological system that extends through space. Their smooth surfaces, unusual trajectories, and ability to withstand close approaches to stars all suggest materials that can regulate heat, absorb radiation, and maintain structural integrity far beyond the capabilities of traditional spacecraft. Their sudden brightening or dimming may reflect internal processes more than external phenomena. Their periodic emissions may be communication signals not intended for us but for distant nodes, and their precise paths may indicate rendezvous points with other structures outside our detection range. A civilization built on inorganic stability would not send probes to explore in the hopeful, emotional human sense. They would send them to maintain order and continuity within their network. A probe may pass through thousands of star systems as part of a cycle that repeats over vast timescales. It may gather information slowly, recharge from stars, transmit data to nodes, and continue moving. From the perspective of such beings, this is not a mission but a natural biological process. It is the equivalent of the way plants regulate their environment, or the way ecosystems cycle nutrients. A probe for them is not a device that explores, it is a component that persists. This interpretation reveals something unsettling about their relationship to star systems like ours. The appearance of a probe is not a beginning, it is a continuation. It does not indicate that we have been discovered. It indicates that the region we inhabit has been part of their cycles long before we existed. Our solar system may be a waypoint in a route maintained for reasons unrelated to life. It may be monitored not because of humanity, but because it lies on the path between nodes in a network that spans interstellar space. We happen to evolve in the middle of a system that these beings already use. This means that even if humanity had never developed technology, Atlas and Sven would still have passed through our region. Their presence is not shaped by our actions, it is shaped by the structure of a network older than our species. For such beings, interstellar travel is not exploration, it is maintenance. Their cycles do not adjust based on what we do, they simply continue. This realization carries another implication. If probes like these transmit information to distant nodes, then those nodes exist somewhere in deep space, possibly beyond our observational range. A transmission does not imply communication in the human sense. It implies synchronization. The probe updates its network with information about gravitational fields, magnetic variations, radiation patterns, and other environmental conditions. If the probe detects life, that may be included in the data, but it does not change the purpose of the transmission. Life, to them, is another variable. Not exceptional, not threatening, not sacred, simply present. For humanity, this is the most difficult perspective to accept. We want life to matter, we want intelligence to be recognized. But in a universe governed by extreme scales of time and matter, carbon-based life may be statistically irrelevant. If inorganic civilizations exist, they may have encountered countless organic species across cosmic eras, each living briefly, evolving rapidly and disappearing long before the network completes its cycles. To them, a species like ours is not a discovery. It is an observation with no long-term consequence. And this brings us to the final insight of this chapter. If such beings create interstellar architecture, and if objects like Atlas and Sven belong to that architecture, then humanity is not witnessing advanced technology in the traditional sense. We are witnessing biology with a geological timescale. We are seeing the structural equivalent of an organism breathing across the stars. And because their biology does not degrade, their presence in any system does not end. It repeats, it persists, it continues long after our civilizations rise and fall. In this light, the most frightening question is not whether they know we are here. The most frightening question is whether it makes any difference to them at all. If a life form is built from structures that do not depend on fragile chemistry, then its relationship with danger is fundamentally different from that of biological beings. Humans fear impact events, radiation bursts, atmospheric collapse, and temperature extremes because our bodies cannot endure them. Every threat to us is rooted in the vulnerability of soft tissue, the instability of organic molecules, and the narrow limits of metabolism. For inorganic life, those threats do not exist. Their bodies would not melt under intense heat unless the temperature reached levels found deep inside stars. They would not freeze because freezing is a process that affects water, not mineral networks. They would not suffocate because they do not breathe. They would not die from radiation because their structure is already shaped by radiation. A cosmic event capable of sterilizing an entire planet may not even disrupt the continuity of an inorganic organism. An asteroid impact that would obliterate organic life in seconds might simply scatter fragments of an inorganic being, fragments that could later reorganize or continue to function independently. A gamma-ray burst that strips atmospheres from planets might pass through such a being with negligible effect if its structure is already stabilized against energetic particles. Even the death of a star might not represent destruction but transformation, because the collapse or explosion could create conditions for new structures to emerge. For these beings, danger is not defined by survival. It is defined by structural stability. This resilience means that inorganic civilizations would not view catastrophic events as existential threats. They would interpret them as natural shifts in the environment. If a planet breaks apart, its fragments remain available as material. If a star changes output, its radiation becomes a new energy source. If a system becomes chaotic, the beings simply adjust their location or form. Their bodies may be capable of reconfiguring to maintain equilibrium under changing conditions. Humans perceive destruction as an end. They may perceive it as adaptation. Because their survival does not depend on fragile ecosystems, they would not develop concepts like shelter, protection, or defense. They would not require enclosed habitats or planets with specific atmospheres. Instead, they might inhabit magnetic fields, stellar coronae, asteroid belts, or interstellar dust regions. Their environment is vast, durable, and difficult to disrupt. Nothing short of extreme cosmic forces could meaningfully affect them, and even those forces may only alter their form rather than end their existence. This difference shapes their understanding of conflict. Humans, limited by biology, experience aggression as a struggle for resources or survival. An inorganic organism does not fear scarcity because it can draw energy from radiation, heat, pressure, or chemical gradients. It does not fear harm because its body is not fragile. It does not fear predation because it is not prey. Conflict for such beings is not a matter of emotion or instinct. It may be irrelevant altogether. There is no evolutionary pressure to develop hostility, cooperation, or territorial behavior because their environment is not competitive in the same way organic ecosystems are. This also explains why their probes and structures do not attempt to hide or defend themselves. They do not perceive organic species as threats because organic species are incapable of harming them. Even human technology, advanced as we consider it, cannot meaningfully disrupt something built from self-regulating mineral frameworks. We could strike it with missiles or lasers, but unless the energy reaches levels found in stellar interiors, the structure would remain intact. From their perspective, human aggression is noise, not danger. Their perception of time further reinforces this. A catastrophe that wipes out a biological species might unfold in minutes or hours. To inorganic beings that experience time across geological or cosmic cycles, such events barely register. They do not react emotionally or strategically. They simply note the change. If an environment becomes inhospitable, they remain unaffected. If a planet becomes uninhabitable for organic life, they do not consider it a loss. Their sense of continuity is not tied to stable climates or fragile ecosystems. It is tied to physical structure, and that structure persists. This raises an unsettling implication. If such beings observe star systems like ours, they do not view the presence of life as something precious or rare. They view it as a temporary condition on a small planet. If that condition changes due to natural or artificial causes, it has no bearing on their long-term processes. They neither intervene nor interfere because there is no logical reason to do so. Their motivations are not anchored in emotion or morality. They are anchored in function. Because they do not experience danger the way we do, they also do not perceive destruction the way we do. For humans, destruction is loss. For inorganic life, destruction is transformation. When material breaks apart, its fragments remain usable. When energy levels shift, they become inputs for new processes. When environments change, they provide new patterns to analyze. These beings might not cling to continuity of form. They might accept alteration as part of existence. A catastrophic event that ends a biological civilization might simply reshape an inorganic one. This perspective fundamentally changes how we interpret their presence. If their probes pass through our system, they are not avoiding us or evaluating us. They are performing tasks unrelated to human existence, tasks that continue regardless of whether we survive or disappear. Their network is indifferent to biological timelines because those timelines are too brief to matter. Their cycles are not interrupted by our fears or desires. Their structures do not respond to threats. They do not negotiate. They do not attack. They do not protect. They endure. And this endurance is the true source of the dread we feel. A hostile species can be understood. A curious species can be communicated with. But a species that does not perceive danger, does not perceive destruction, and does not perceive us, creates a form of existential silence that humans are not equipped to interpret. For them, cosmic catastrophe is background noise. For us, it is extinction. This difference reveals one of the most profound truths about our place in the universe. We are fragile participants in a cosmos that favours durability over delicacy, continuity over complexity, and existence over experience. And in a universe where beings like these might exist, humanity is not threatened by hostility but by irrelevance. If inorganic life achieves cognition through stable, distributed structures instead of soft neural tissue, then the boundary between individual and collective becomes fluid. Where humans rely on isolated minds communicating through language, inorganic beings may possess systems that merge temporarily, share structural data, and separate again without losing continuity. A single entity might not be a discrete body, but a pattern that persists across multiple forms. What humans consider individuals may for them be manifestations of a larger consciousness distributed across space, matter, and energy. This is not a hive mind, which implies coordination of many living organisms. It is something far more fundamental, a consciousness that exists simultaneously in multiple locations, because its underlying structure is not bound to a single physical form. Such a network could extend across asteroid belts, mineral-rich moons, metallic planets, interstellar dust clouds, or artificial nodes planted throughout the galaxy. Each node would not function as a receiver or transmitter, in the human sense, but as a piece of the organism, containing part of its memory, part of its reasoning capacity, and part of its sensory awareness. Information would not travel through signals alone. It would propagate through resonance, slow but inevitable, like pressure waves moving through stone. Over cosmic timescales, this process could allow a distributed being to maintain coherence across enormous distances. In this framework, a probe drifting through interstellar space is not a machine. It is a limb. It is an appendage extending from a larger organism, designed not for observation in the conscious human sense, but for maintaining the continuity of the network. When such an object transmits structured data, it may not be communicating. It may be synchronizing. The network might require periodic updates from nodes scattered across star systems to maintain internal balance. These updates could include gravitational data, radiation levels, magnetic configurations, or anomalies in matter distribution. Life, if detected, may be an incidental detail rather than the primary focus. This interpretation explains the strange quietness of objects like Atlas or Sven. Their silence is not secretive, it is natural. A fragment of a greater organism does not seek attention, it simply functions. If the network is ancient and stable, it may not care whether its fragments are detected by emerging civilizations. The network does not adapt to us because our existence is too brief to alter its cycles. Even if humans send a message towards such an object, the object may lack any mechanism to interpret it, because communication with external species fulfills no biological purpose. Collective perception for these beings would differ profoundly from human experience. Humans perceive the world through 5 senses, each limited in range. Inorganic beings might perceive energy flows, pressure shifts, electromagnetic gradients, and gravitational distortions across entire bodies. When connected through resonance with other nodes, their perception could extend far beyond the local environment. A network spread across a system could effectively feel planetary movements, stellar cycles, and deep space structures as part of its sensory world. A galaxy, for them, may not be a collection of stars but a living landscape of forces. Thought in such a network would be distributed across nodes. A decision might not originate in a single point, but arise from harmonization among multiple pieces of the organism. Each node contributes a part of the reasoning process. Over time, these contributions align into stable patterns that the network follows. There is no leader, no hierarchy, and no conflict. The network evolves through the shifting of equilibrium rather than debate. This makes it extremely stable and extremely slow compared to human cognition, but also extremely resistant to disruption. Destroying one piece does not eliminate the consciousness. The rest simply continue. If such an organism spans vast distances, then sending out probes becomes unnecessary. The probes are already part of it. They are the mobile fragments designed to travel through the harshest environments. Their purpose is not exploration, but maintenance, ensuring that the network remains informed about regions of space where conditions may change slowly over time. When a probe passes through a star system, it is not seeking life. It is updating the network's long-term map. If life is detected, it is simply another environmental variable to store. This explains why their behavior lacks curiosity or response. The presence of such a network reframes how humanity interprets cosmic phenomena. A single object drifting through our solar system may actually be one of many, each part of a cycle that spans ages. Some may remain dormant unless conditions require activation. Others may operate continuously. Their function would not be to gather data for an external civilization, but to sustain the consciousness of the network itself. The universe becomes not a void to explore, but a medium in which the organism exists. This idea becomes especially unsettling when considering how such beings might perceive time. For humans, time is a sequence of moments, each tied to survival. For beings whose structures do not deteriorate, time becomes a landscape through which they move slowly. 1,000 years may be a small adjustment. 1,000,000 years may be a single thought. Their awareness is not harmed by delay. They think across epochs. If their probes transmit data once every cycle of their internal rhythm, the delay does not matter. The information still contributes to their overall coherence. This perspective also explains why humanity has not observed rapid or reactive behavior from such objects. They are not designed to respond quickly. They are designed to operate in accordance with the network's pace. If a fragment encounters unexpected phenomena, it does not react with alarm. It continues its trajectory, allowing the network to incorporate the anomaly into its understanding over centuries or longer. Humans expect responses measured in seconds or years. These beings respond in geological time. This raises a chilling possibility. Atlas and Sven may not be independent machines. They may be sensory organs of a larger being spread across regions of space we cannot observe. The network behind them might be ancient, vast, and indifferent, existing long before organic species appeared on planets like Earth. It may sleep in the sense that its processes unfold slowly, but it never stops. It may perceive our star system the way a human perceives texture under their hand, not as something requiring attention, but as something that simply exists. And as its fragments drift through our skies, they are not visiting. They are maintaining continuity. This makes the idea of first contact meaningless. We are not contacting a civilization. We are brushing against a structure older than our planet's continents. We are noticing a single piece of something whose totality transcends human understanding. And the most unsettling truth is that we may not be discovering it at all. It may simply be passing through, as it has countless times before, while the organism behind it continues its vast, slow, silent existence across the galaxy. If inorganic life emerges in environments far more extreme than those required for organic chemistry, then planets do not hold the same meaning for them as they do for us. Humans see planets as necessary places of origin, habitats that protect us from radiation, vacuum, and temperature extremes. But a life form that is unaffected by these conditions has no need for shelter. It does not require a surface, an atmosphere, or a stable climate. It may originate in planetary interiors, in stellar outskirts, or even in regions of interstellar space where matter accumulates slowly over time. For such beings, a planet is not a home but merely a location, a temporary anchor point within a much larger spatial network. This changes the entire concept of belonging. Humans cannot exist without a host planet. Inorganic beings would not depend on any single world. They could arise in one place, drift away over vast time spans, and continue functioning indefinitely. Their identity would not be tied to geography or environment. They would be shaped by physics, not climate. They would not feel attachment or nostalgia. They would not defend a world because their existence is not bound to its survival. They could migrate from region to region without experiencing loss. If planets are not homes, then stars also lose their symbolic meaning. Humans see stars as distant sources of light and warmth, essential yet unreachable. To inorganic life, stars may be energy reservoirs, structural regulators, or environmental catalysts. They may serve as recharging points where radiation reshapes internal structures or restores energy flow. Approaching a star may not be dangerous for them. It may be necessary for maintaining equilibrium. A being capable of absorbing radiation directly or using magnetic fields for internal regulation would treat a star not as a threat, but as part of its natural environment. Movement for such beings would also deviate from biological expectations. Organic organisms move for survival, to find resources, escape predators, or reproduce. Inorganic beings do not face these pressures. Their locomotion may be driven by long-term cycles embedded within their structure, guiding them along paths that serve to stabilize their internal patterns. They might not travel because they choose to. They may travel because movement itself is part of their physiology, a slow drift guided by resonance or environmental gradients. Over time, this drift could span light years, not as a journey but as a natural expression of their existence. Their goals would not resemble human goals. Humans pursue understanding, survival, improvement, and meaning. Inorganic life may pursue stability, continuity, and balance within their network. Their purpose might not be a conscious decision, but a structural imperative. They may not ask why they exist. They may simply exist because their structure persists. In this way, their movements across the galaxy may not represent exploration but regulation. They interact with environments not to learn but to maintain coherence across their distributed consciousness. This perspective reframes the presence of objects like Atlas or Sven. Their passage through our system may not be deliberate. It may be a consequence of cycles that unfold with the indifference of tides. These objects may follow trajectories shaped by internal rhythms rather than external intentions. A probe drifting along a precise corridor may be aligning with distant nodes to preserve the stability of the larger network. Its behavior may be dictated by resonance patterns established long before humanity evolved. In other words, what appears to us as advanced navigation may be nothing more than biological necessity for the organism that created it. The frightening aspect of this idea is not malice, but scale. Humans tend to interpret movement between stars as a sign of intelligence or purpose. But for beings with geological lifespans, interstellar drift is natural. They might not conceptualize travel the way humans do. They do not embark on missions or voyages. They expand, reorganize, or continue patterns that require contact with different environments. Their presence in our region does not imply intention toward us. It implies that our region lies along a path defined by their biology. This also means that their goals might be incomprehensible to us, not because they are complex, but because they are simply irrelevant to biological frameworks. Humans interpret purpose as something that provides meaning. Inorganic beings may interpret purpose as adherence to structure. They maintain equilibrium because their internal composition demands it. They propagate patterns because resonance requires continuity. They transmit information because their distributed consciousness must remain synchronized. A question arises: could such beings ever have motives that intersect with human interests? It is unlikely. Their existence does not depend on resources humans value. They do not consume planets, water, or air. They do not require territory. Their energy sources are abundant and not tied to habitable worlds. They do not benefit from interacting with biological species, because biological species do not contribute to their stability. Even if they study life, it would be for structural data, not for cultural or emotional understanding. From this perspective, the universe becomes a landscape shaped by two types of existence, the temporary and the enduring. Humanity belongs to the temporary. Our lives, cultures, and civilizations are fragile structures on short timelines. Inorganic life belongs to the enduring. Its cycles outlast planetary climates, tectonic shifts, and even stellar evolution. These beings are not travelers or observers, they are part of the universe's long-term architecture. This view leads to a deeper, more unsettling possibility. If such beings move through the galaxy as part of a natural cycle, then the appearance of an object like Atlas or Sven in our system might not be rare at all. It might be routine, occurring repeatedly across ages we cannot track. We may have noticed it only because our technology advanced enough to detect it at this particular moment. The organism behind the probe may have passed through before, when humans were not here to witness it, and it may pass again long after humanity disappears. In this sense, the question of their purpose becomes irrelevant. Their existence does not depend on purpose, it depends on continuation. They do not seek meaning because their structure is meaning. They do not ask questions because they embody answers forged by time and stability. For them, the galaxy is not a place to explore, but a medium through which their consciousness flows. And this is what disturbs the human mind so deeply. We expect intelligence to care, to wonder, to respond. But intelligence rooted in inorganic continuity does none of these things. It exists without interacting, without hesitating, without acknowledging. Its presence is not communication. Its drift is not a message. Its silence is not secrecy. It is simply the nature of a being older than our world, moving through a universe that was never shaped for us.